My name is Renee. I was 34 years old when I opened my front door on a Saturday morning and found my ex-husband standing there in a coat he couldn't afford, asking me for a second chance. 5 years earlier, that same man heard me say, "I'm pregnant," and walked out of our apartment without a single word, just his keys off the counter and 4 words: "I can't do this." He thought I spent those 5 years waiting. What he didn't know was that 3 months before he knocked on my door, I already had a folder in my bottom dresser drawer with his name on it, bank records, withdrawal dates, a fraud examiner's findings that traced money he moved, quietly, carefully, before he ever walked out that door. He didn't come back for me. He didn't come back for our daughter, and he had no idea what was already in motion. Let me tell you how I got here. Before we dive in, comment where you're watching from today, and if stories like this speak to you, hit subscribe, because tomorrow's story is even more intense. The oatmeal was almost ready when the knock came. I remember that detail because I'd been standing at the stove thinking about nothing in particular, the way you do on a Saturday morning when the world is still quiet and the only sound is the spoon scraping the pot and your daughter breathing down the hall. That kind of stillness is something I used to take for granted. I don't anymore. My name is Renee Caldwell. I'm 34 years old. I'm a licensed practical nurse. I work the floor at County General, and I have been doing this. All of this, the shifts and the bills and the school pickups and the everything, on my own for 5 years. My apartment is small. The kitchen is narrow. The couch has a cushion that never sits quite right. But the lights stay on and the fridge is full, and my daughter has never once gone to bed scared. That's not nothing. That is, in fact, everything. I built this. From the ground up. From the wreckage. Amara was still asleep, 4 years old, and she slept like it was her full-time job, arms out, mouth open, completely unbothered by the world. I used to stand in the doorway of her room just to watch her breathe. I still do. There's something about watching your child sleep that puts the whole weight of why you kept going right in front of you, plain as day. You know who helped me keep going? My oldest friend, Phyllis Monroe, a retired paralegal who I've known since our sophomore year of college, who was in the delivery room when Amara came into the world, and who has never once let me believe I was alone in any of this. Phyllis doesn't do sympathy speeches. She does solutions. When I was drowning in medical bills and pride in equal measure, she showed up with a legal pad and a red pen and said, "Okay, what do we actually owe and what are they just hoping we'll pay?" That's love. The kind with edges. So that was my life. Quiet mornings and long shifts, and Phyllis on the other end of the phone. I had earned every inch of it. Let me tell you something about Damon Caldwell before he shows up at my door, because you need to understand what I saw and what I chose not to see. He was charming, genuinely, the kind of man who made you feel seen when he looked at you, like you were the most interesting person in any room. He was a regional sales manager, good at his job, good at reading people and telling them what they wanted to hear. I thought that was confidence. I was 27, and I thought confidence and security were the same thing. They are not. The red flags were there. I just filed them under, "That's just how he is," and moved on. The night I got my first real raise at the hospital, I'm talking a meaningful bump, the kind that changes your monthly math, he went quiet over dinner. Not upset exactly, just absent. Like something had shifted in a calculation he was running that I didn't know about. He said, "That's great, babe," and changed the subject, and I told myself he was tired. Then there was the time I got pulled into a leadership meeting at work. My charge nurse had recommended me for a committee. I came home, excited. He listened with his arms crossed and said, "Just make sure it doesn't mess with your shifts. We need your income steady." Not congratulations, not "that's amazing." We need your income steady. Like my ambition was only valid when it served the household budget he controlled. And the sacrifices? Lord. Every late shift I covered, every class I took, every weekend I gave up was somehow framed as the expected thing, not a sacrifice, just my contribution. like I was paying rent on a life he was gracious enough to share with me. I ignored it. 7 years of marriage, and I kept smoothing it over, kept telling myself the good outweighed the rest. I remembered the way he used to laugh, really laugh, head back, completely unguarded, and I mistook that man for the whole man. That was my mistake. Not my only one, but the one that cost me the most. I was stirring the oatmeal and thinking about none of this when the knock came. I wasn't expecting anyone. My downstairs neighbor sometimes borrowed coffee on weekends, so I didn't think twice. I turned the burner down, wiped my hands on a dish towel, and pulled open the door. It was not my neighbor. Damon stood on my doorstep in a charcoal wool coat that probably cost more than my car payment. He looked tired, in the way people look when they've been performing fine for too long and the mask is starting to slip. 5 years had touched him, around the eyes, around the jaw, in the set of his shoulders. He was still handsome. I noticed that the way you notice weather, just a fact. He said my name. I said nothing. I held up one finger. "Wait here." I stepped back inside, left the door open just enough, and stood in the middle of my kitchen with both hands flat on the counter. The oatmeal was still warm. The spoon was still in the pot. Everything exactly where I'd left it. I gave myself 10 seconds. That's all I allowed. Then I went back to the door. Because there are things you have to hear, even when you already know them. And I had waited long enough to hear this one on my terms. But first, let me take you back. Because you can't understand what I felt standing at that door without understanding what happened the last time I saw his face. 5 years earlier, a Thursday night in October. I was 8 weeks along, and I didn't know it yet when I first missed my period. But by the time I stood in that bathroom holding the test, I knew. The second line came up fast, no hesitation. I sat on the edge of the tub for a minute, just breathing, and then something opened up in my chest that I can only describe as warmth. Pure, uncomplicated warmth. I was going to be somebody's mother. I pressed the test to my sternum like it was something holy. My hands were shaking, not from fear, from joy. I remembered my own mother the night before I left for college, pressing her lips to my forehead in the parking lot of a Greyhound station, her eyes wet, saying, "You carry us with you, you hear me? Every single one of us." That's what I felt in that bathroom, like I was already carrying something forward. I walked out to the living room. Damon was on the couch with the TV on, shoes still on, half watching some game. I stood in the doorway. I said his name. He looked up. I didn't even finish the sentence. I got as far as, "I'm pregnant," and I watched his face. And it wasn't the face of a man about to become a father. It was the face of a man doing math. Rapid, private, unhappy math. His jaw shifted. His eyes moved somewhere past me. He went quiet. You know what that specific silence sounds like? It sounds like a decision being made. He stood up from the couch, slow and deliberate, like a man who had somewhere to be. He picked his keys up off the coffee table, and then he looked at me, really looked at me, and said 4 words. "I can't do this." He walked to the door. He opened it. He left. No fight, no raised voice, no tears, no explanation, no, "Let me think," no, "I just need a minute." He walked out like a man who had been waiting for the door to open, like I had simply knocked at the right moment. I stood in the kitchen until the oatmeal burned. 3 days later, a text. "I'm filing. I'm sorry." 11 characters, including the period. His attorney called mine 2 weeks after that. By my second trimester, I was sitting alone at a conference table signing papers while my daughter turned somersaults inside me, and a paralegal I'd never met stamped things and didn't make eye contact. I keep coming back to one night, even now, about 2 years before all of that. A regular Tuesday. We'd ordered takeout. the Thai place on Clement Street, and the boxes were still spread across the coffee table when he got down on one knee, and then immediately started laughing because he'd lost the ring in the couch cushions. He was digging through the cushions with this ridiculous grin on his face, sheepish and delighted, and I was laughing so hard I was crying. He found it wedged under the armrest. He held it up like he'd won something. I said yes before he even finished the question. I loved that man. I want you to know that. I loved the one who laughed with couch cushion ring, the one who was completely unguarded for that one stupid, perfect minute. The problem was, that man wasn't the whole man, and I spent 7 years loving a version of him he only showed me in small doses. I understand that now. Back at the door, present morning, November. Damon was still standing where I'd left him, shifting his weight the way people do when they've rehearsed something and they're ready to deliver it. He started talking the moment I stepped back into the frame. He'd made mistakes. He knew that. He'd done a lot of thinking. He was different now. He'd been through some things, real things, hard things, and it had changed his perspective. He wanted to do right. By Amara, by the situation, by us, if there was any road back to something like that. He said, and here is the part that locked my jaw, "I've changed, Renee. I think we owe it to ourselves to talk." We owe it to ourselves. I looked at him for one long moment. Then I closed the door. Not a slam, not a statement, just a slow, soft click, the kind that costs more than a slam ever could. I set my back against it and stood perfectly still. I didn't cry. I want to be clear about that. I stood against that door for maybe 30 seconds, and then I pushed off and walked straight to my bedroom. Not because I was holding it together, because there was nothing to hold. I had already done my grieving, years ago, in a hospital room with Phyllis squeezing my hand and no one else present for the arrival of the most important person in my life. Whatever Damon thought he was taking from me by showing up on my doorstep, he was 5 years too late. I opened the bottom drawer of my dresser. The folder was right where I'd left it, thick, rubber-banded, tabbed with sticky notes in 3 colors because I am a woman who color codes things when the stakes are high enough. I pulled it out, set it on the bed, and sat down beside it with my hands in my lap. 3 months. That's how long I'd known he was coming. It was a Tuesday in August when Yvette called me. Damon's mother, Yvette Caldwell, a woman I hadn't spoken to in over 3 years, called my cell phone at 7:15 in the evening like no time had passed at all. She was warm. Too warm. The kind of warm that means someone is nervous. She asked how I was doing. She asked how Amara was. She said she'd been thinking about us. About family. She used that word 3 times in 4 minutes, which told me everything. And then, carefully, the way a woman who chooses words for a living chooses them, she said that Damon had been going through some changes lately, that he was doing a lot of reflecting, that he wanted to make things right before things fall apart. She caught herself right after, moved on quickly, but I'd already heard it. Before things fall apart. Not because he's grown, not because he misses his daughter. Before things fall apart. That's a man running toward a lifeboat, not a man seeking redemption. I thanked her. I kept my voice easy. I got off the phone and called my oldest friend, Phyllis Monroe, a retired paralegal, before Yvette's number had even cleared my recent calls. Phyllis didn't waste time on sympathy. That's one of the things I love most about her. She said, "Okay, so what do we need to find?" She connected me with her younger brother, Deshaun Monroe, who had been my CPA since the divorce. Sharp, methodical. The kind of man who could find a discrepancy in a spreadsheet the way other people find spelling errors. I asked him to pull everything, old accounts, closed records, anything with both our names on it. He called me back 4 days later. There was a joint savings account, one I believed had been zeroed out and closed when we finalized the divorce. It wasn't closed, and between the month he walked out and the month Amara was born, someone had been making withdrawals from it. Small ones. $80 here, $120 there. Never enough to trip a fraud alert, never enough to look like anything other than routine. But they added up. And the dates matched the months I was working double shifts at the hospital and eating peanut butter sandwiches for dinner because rent and prenatal vitamins didn't leave room for much else. My throat had tightened when Deshawn read me the dates. I remember standing at my kitchen window, looking at nothing. You know what 5 years of silence teaches you? It teaches you that you are enough. And I was. But knowing that didn't make the numbers any less ugly. I put everything in the folder. The withdrawal dates, the account statements, a copy of the divorce decree, and then I pulled 2 years of child support records and laid them out side by side. That's when the second pattern showed up, and this one was almost elegant in how deliberate it was. Every payment was slightly short. Not dramatically, not enough to trigger the legal threshold for a formal complaint. Damon was a salesman. He understood margins. He had calculated exactly how much he could skim without crossing the line that would bring consequences. Month after month, just under the wire. I'd noticed it before and assumed it was carelessness. Looking at 2 years of it in a single sitting, I understood it was anything but. Let me tell you something about a woman who's been quiet too long. She sees patterns, and once she sees them, she cannot unsee them. I closed the folder, snapped the rubber band back into place, sat with it in my lap for a moment. Then I picked up my phone and called Deshawn. He answered on the second ring. I asked him one question. "How bad is it?" A pause, longer than I expected. Deshawn was not a man who paused unless what he was about to say required it. Then, "Renee, his name is on something you're going to want to know about." 2 days later, Monday morning. Deshawn Monroe, my CPA, and Phyllis's younger brother, kept his office the way he kept his records. Clean. Organized. Nothing on the desk that didn't need to be there. When I walked in that Monday morning with my folder under my arm, he already had his own papers laid out in 3 neat rows. He stood up, shook my hand like he always did. No hug, no performance, and nodded toward the chair across from him. He'd printed everything, highlighted the relevant lines in yellow, tabs on the corners. I set my folder next to his and sat down. He didn't ease into it. That was another thing I appreciated about Deshawn. He respected you enough to skip the cushioning. His employment situation changed about 14 months ago, he said. Company restructure. His role was commission-heavy, regional sales manager. And when they reorganized the division, the position got absorbed. He's been doing contract sales work since. Inconsistent income, maybe 40% of what he was pulling before. I nodded, kept my face level. He's in a 2-bedroom in Midtown. Rent's close to $2,200 a month. My hands went still on the edge of the desk. $2,200 a month on contractor income with a child support obligation he'd already been quietly shaving. I did that math in about 4 seconds. I'd been a nurse long enough to know what a person looks like when they're bleeding out slowly and refusing to admit it. "There's more," Deshawn said. He slid a page across to me, a loan document, names at the bottom, Damon's, and someone I didn't recognize. About 3 years ago, Damon went in with a business partner on an investment deal. Private equity, essentially. They were pooling investor funds and acquiring distressed commercial properties. The loan they used to launch it was co-signed personally by both parties, secured against projected income. He paused. The deal collapsed 18 months in. His partner dissolved his LLC and stopped responding. Phone, email, everything. Gone. I looked at the document. At Damon's signature at the bottom. At the loan amount. How much is he personally liable for? After what they recovered from the property liquidation, just under $90,000. The room was quiet for a moment. You know what a number like that sounds like when it lands? It doesn't sound like shock. It sounds like confirmation. Like the last piece of a picture you already knew was ugly. He needs stable income on paper, Deshawn said. Clean credit history. Ideally, someone he already has an established legal relationship with. He let that sit for exactly 1 second. Someone like a co-parent. There it was. He didn't need Amara. He didn't need me. He needed my credit score and my employment record and the legal thread that connected us through our daughter, something that would make a restructuring note look less risky to a lender. He'd put on a good coat and driven to my door and said, "I've changed, Renee," because he needed a lifeline, and I was the most convenient one he could think of. I remembered, for a flash, the way he used to reach for my hand at restaurant tables, like I was something he wanted to show off. I'd thought it was affection. I understood now it was inventory. "I want you to keep digging," I said. Deshawn looked at me. "What am I looking for?" Yvette called me in August. She said he needed to make things right before things fall apart. She didn't say because he'd changed. She said before. I lined my fingers up along the edge of the folder. That's a specific kind of urgency. And the account withdrawal started 6 months after he left, which means he was already thinking about money before he filed. I paused. I think the planning started earlier than the paperwork shows. I want to know how much earlier. Deshawn was quiet for a moment, thinking. Then he said, "I have a contact, financial fraud examiner, semi-retired, does consulting work. If there's a pre-divorce money trail, something that got moved before the accounts were ever disclosed in the settlement, she'd be the one to find it." "Pull the thread," I said. He nodded once. That was enough. I sat in my parked car outside his building for a while after that, not crying, just sitting with the shape of it. $90,000 in personal liability, a lease he couldn't afford, a business partner who evaporated, and Damon. Charming, polished, always reading the room Damon, pointing all of it in my direction like I was a solution instead of a person. Was any of it ever about me? I didn't answer that. Not then. I started the car. I had 20 minutes before Amara's daycare closed for the afternoon pickup window, and she'd been asking for pasta with butter all week, so that's what I was going to make. Pasta and butter, and whatever piece I could fit into a Tuesday evening. The numbers could wait one more night. 2 days later, Wednesday morning, I called Yvette at 9:15, after I dropped Amara at daycare and come back to a quiet apartment. I made fresh coffee, pulled out a legal pad, and sat down at the kitchen table. I wrote the date at the top. Then I wrote "listen" and underlined it twice. That was the whole strategy. Just listen. She picked up on the second ring, and I could hear it immediately, the warmth that was working a little too hard. "Renee! Oh, it's so good to hear your voice, sweetheart. How are you? How is she doing?" She almost said Amara. Caught herself, like the name was something she wasn't sure she'd earned the right to use yet. "She's great," I said. "Growing fast. I just bet she is." A pause, and then the exhale of a woman releasing pressure she'd been holding. "I'm so glad you called. I really am. I've been thinking about you." I wrote, "Thinking about you." I let her keep going. She talked for a while about nothing. The weather, her church, a cousin's wedding she'd attended in September. The kind of filler a nervous person uses while they decide how honest to be. I didn't rush her. I just asked small questions. How's the neighborhood? You still doing those Tuesday dinners? Easy things. Things that said I was present and not armed. Then, when she'd loosened up enough, I said, "Damon came by Saturday." Silence. 1 beat. 2. "I know," she said. "He told me. He seemed like he had a lot on his mind." "He does." And here was where she shifted. Less performance, more weight. "He's been going through a hard time, Renee. I don't say that to make excuses for him. You know how he is when things aren't going right. He gets in his own head and he can't find his way out." She paused. "He just needs a little stability right now, to get his feet back under him." A little stability. I wrote it down, word for word. "He mentioned wanting to spend time with Amara," I said. "That must mean a lot to you." The sound she made wasn't quite a word. It was softer than that. That little girl has never even seen my face, she said. You know that? 4 years. I have pictures. You used to send them, and I cherish every single one. But I have never held her, never been in the same room. Her voice went tight at the edges. Damon said that coming back, making things right, that's partly about giving her that family, giving her a grandmother who loves her. You know what I noticed? She said Damon said. Not I believe, not I think. She was telling me what she'd been told. She was reciting the pitch. I kept my voice even. Did he talk to you about what that would look like? His relationship with Amara going forward? He said he wants to be present, really present. He said maybe, she caught herself again. He said he thinks there might be a path to rebuilding something between the two of you. That maybe if you both just sat down and talked honestly, you might find that things hadn't changed as much as you thought. I wrote, rebuilding something. Then I wrote, as much as you thought. The coffee beside me had gone cold. I didn't reach for it. I appreciate you sharing that, I said, and I meant it, just not the way she thought I did. I called my oldest friend, Phyllis Monroe, retired paralegal, at noon. She was at her desk. She did freelance document work on Wednesdays, and she listened without interrupting while I told her everything. The warmth that was really nerves, the stability comment, the grandmother who'd received 4 years of monthly photos and had never once written back, and who was now talking about cherishing every single one. When I finished, Phyllis was quiet for a moment. Then she asked one question. What do you want to do? I'd been sitting with that all morning. I knew the anger was there. My jaw had been tight for 2 days. But anger wasn't an answer. Anger was just weather. What I wanted was underneath it. I want the full picture before I move, I said. I want to know exactly how far back this goes. I want every number, every date, every decision he made while I was eating peanut butter sandwiches and working doubles. I paused. And then I want to do something with it that actually holds. Phyllis didn't flinch. She didn't soften it either. Then let's do it right, she said. That evening, after Amara was down and the apartment was quiet, I picked up my phone. I opened Damon's contact, the number I'd never deleted, never used, just kept the way you keep a document you might need someday. I typed 4 words. Come by, Saturday morning. I set the phone face down on the counter and went to check on Amara. She was asleep on her side, one arm wrapped around the stuffed elephant she'd named Peanut. I stood in the doorway for a moment, just watched her breathe. Then I went back to the kitchen and finished the dishes. Saturday morning, 8 days after he knocked the first time, I was up at 6. Not because I couldn't sleep. I slept fine. I was up because I wanted to be ready before he got there. And I mean ready. Dressed, coffee brewed, dishes done, every surface clear. I wasn't performing composure for him. I was building it for myself. There's a difference. Amara was already at Phyllis's. I dropped her the night before with her overnight bag and Peanut the elephant tucked under her arm. Phyllis had looked at me over Amara's head and said, "Call me after." Not a question. I said, "I will." And then I came home and went to bed at 10 o'clock like a woman with nothing to prove. He knocked at 9:02. I opened the door before the second knock. He looked better than he had the first time. He'd made an effort. Fresh haircut, good shoes, that same coat pressed instead of wrinkled. He was performing something. I clocked it the moment his eyes landed on my face, and he adjusted, softened, pulled up the expression he wanted me to see. "Hey," he said, like we were old friends. "Come in," I said. I poured him coffee without asking, set it on the table, sat across from him and folded my hands and waited. You know what a man looks like when he's rehearsed? He starts with the big feelings, because he's practiced the big feelings. He knows where to put the pauses. "I know I don't have any right to just show up," Damon started. "I know that. I spent a long time telling myself I was protecting you, that you were better off, that you'd built something good and I'd just bring it down. But I was lying to myself, Renee. I was being a coward and I dressed it up as consideration, and that wasn't fair to you. He wrapped both hands around the coffee mug. I've done a lot of growing. I've had to sit with some real hard truths about who I was and what I threw away. And I guess I needed you to know, that I see it now. He paused for effect. I watched him. What do you need, Damon? The pause broke apart. Just slightly. Just enough. This isn't about need. I'm here because I want to do right by Amara. I want to be in her life. That's the whole thing. Okay, I said. What else? His jaw moved. Not quite a flinch, but close. What do you mean, what else? I mean, what else? I kept my voice level. What else do you need? He set the mug down. He looked at the table for a moment, then back up at me, and I watched him make the calculation. How much to say, how to frame it, what version would land best with the woman sitting across from him who wasn't giving him a single thing to work with. Then he said it. I've hit a rough patch, financially. It's temporary. I've got a restructuring in place. I've got the framework of a plan. It just needs one piece to stabilize. One co-signer on a note. That's it. Something small, just to bridge the gap. He leaned forward slightly. You know I'm good for it, Renee. You know me. You've always known I find a way through. I let that sit in the air for a moment. I do know you, I said. Something moved behind his eyes. He couldn't quite read it. I wasn't sure if it was agreement or something else, and that uncertainty was the thing that cracked him open. Look, I get it, okay? I know I hurt you. I know this is hard to hear, but keeping me out of Amara's life because you're still angry? That's not fair to her. That is not fair to our daughter. His voice climbed. I just need one thing from you, after everything, and you're going to sit there and make me feel like I'm asking for something outrageous? You always did this. You always had to be the one holding the cards, controlling the situation, making sure I knew where I stood. His hand came off the mug and landed flat on the table. I just need some help, and I'm asking you like a grown man, and you're looking at me like I'm on trial. The room stayed exactly where it was. My breathing didn't change. I haven't held anything over you, Damon, I said. I've just been here. He went quiet. The kind of quiet that happens when a man runs out of prepared material and realizes the other person isn't going to fill the silence for him. I stood up. Thanks for coming by, I said. He opened his mouth, closed it, picked up the coffee mug, set it back down. He understood that the conversation was over, even if he hadn't meant it to be. He stood up slowly, the way a man does when he's still hoping something will shift at the last second. Nothing shifted. I walked him to the door and closed it behind him. Quietly. No slam, just the soft click of the latch catching. Then I turned around, leaned back against the door, and let myself smile. Just once. Small and private, and completely mine. Deshawn's fraud examiner contact had been pulling records for a week now. Whatever was buried in those documents, it was almost time to see it. The following Thursday, my break was at 2:15. I took it in the break room with a cup of bad coffee and a granola bar I wasn't hungry for. The floor had been relentless. 3 admissions before noon, a family in room 7 who needed more hand-holding than medicine. I was tired in the specific way that only a 12-hour shift produces, the kind that settles into your shoulders and stays. My phone buzzed. Deshawn. I picked up on the second ring. He said my name first. Just my name, the way he always opened a call. But the half second before he said anything else told me everything I needed to know about what was coming. Deshawn was a man who kept his voice professionally flat, no matter what he was delivering. That half second was the only place his feelings ever showed. I got the examiner's report, he said. Okay. I want to walk you through it in person, but I'm going to give you the headline now so you're not blindsided later. My hand tightened around the phone. Go ahead, he told me. The business partnership wasn't new. Damon and his partner had been operating together for 3 years. Not 2, not 1.5, 3. which meant the partnership started roughly 8 months after our divorce was final, which meant the planning started before that. Deshawn's contact had traced the startup capital through a chain of transfers, 3 accounts, 2 of them private, and part of that capital, a significant part, led back to a joint investment account I had never known existed, an account opened in both our names, without my knowledge, before the divorce. Funded with money Damon had moved quietly, incrementally, from our shared savings in the months before he walked out. I sat with that for a moment. "How long before?" I asked. 8 to 10 months. 8 to 10 months. I'd been planning our future while he was planning his exit. I'd been working doubles, covering every bill, building what I thought was a shared foundation. And the whole time, he was already gone. He was just waiting for the right moment to make it official. The pregnancy wasn't what broke him. The pregnancy was his starting gun. "Renee." "I heard you," I said. "Take whatever time you need. Call me when you're ready to talk about next steps." I thanked him. I hung up. You know what the worst part was? It wasn't the money. It wasn't even the fraud. It was the arithmetic of it. 8 to 10 months of sitting across from me at dinner, sleeping in our bed, saying my name like I meant something, while he was already gone in every way that mattered. I had loved a man who had 1 foot out the door before I ever knew the door was open. I went out to my car. I didn't plan to. My feet just went there. I sat in the driver's seat with my badge still clipped to my chest and the January cold coming through the window I hadn't quite closed, and I just stayed. I watched a hospital transport van pull in and out. I watched a couple walk toward the entrance holding hands, slow and unhurried. I watched a sparrow land on the parking barrier in front of me, and then decide it had somewhere better to be. 11 minutes. I know because I watched the clock on my dashboard, and I gave myself exactly that long. Then I thought about my mother, pressing a crumpled 50 into my palm the week before Amara was born. "You're going to be okay, because you're mine." I thought about her face when she said it, not soft, not tearful, just certain, like she was stating a fact about the weather. I straightened my badge. I got out of the car. I went back to work. That evening, Phyllis's kitchen table, I told her everything. Start to finish, no editing. Phyllis, my oldest friend, who'd been a paralegal for 20 years before she retired, listened without interrupting. She was quiet for longer than usual when I finished. Then she put her hands flat on the table and said, "So, what do you want to do?" "All of it," I said. She nodded, once, like she'd expected exactly that answer. We mapped it out together. 3 prongs, clean and deliberate. First, a formal financial crimes complaint filed through Deshawn's examiner contact, built on the diverted account documentation. Second, back to family court with the full picture. Every short child support payment, every calculated shortfall, compounded with interest and backed by Deshawn's records. Third, 1 room, 1 conversation, all the truth on the table at once. Damon, Yvette, me. On my terms, in a place where no one could perform their way out. Phyllis said, "Where?" "Yvette's house." She looked at me. "You sure?" "She needs to hear it too," Phyllis said. "Then let's do it right." We stayed at that table for another 2 hours. By the time I drove home, I had a plan that was airtight and a head that was finally clear. I called Yvette that night at 9 o'clock. She answered on the 3rd ring, voice careful, already braced. I didn't ease into it. I said I wanted to have a conversation. The 3 of us, Damon included, at her house. I said I thought it was time for everything to be said in one place. A silence stretched out. "I think it's time," I said. "Don't you?" Another pause, shorter this time. "Yes," Yvette said. "I think it is." Sunday afternoon, Yvette Caldwell's house. Yvette lived in a brick colonial on a quiet street where every lawn was edged and every curtain was pressed, the kind of neighborhood that said, "We have standards," before you even rang the bell. I'd been to this house maybe a dozen times over 7 years of marriage. I knew the smell of it, lavender and something baked, always something baked, even when nothing was in the oven. I parked at the curb. I sat for exactly one breath. Then I took my folder off the passenger seat and got out of the car. I was wearing dark slacks and a gray blouse. Nothing remarkable. I hadn't dressed for a performance. I dressed for a conversation I intended to finish. Yvette met me at the door. She was poised in the way she always was. Church clothes on a Sunday, hair done, a small smile that was working harder than it looked. She took my coat. She offered coffee. I said yes. Damon was already in the kitchen. He was leaning back in his chair the way men lean when they believe the outcome is already settled. One arm resting on the table, jacket off, the ghost of a smile on his face. He looked like a man who had already been told the meeting went his way. He said, "Renee?" Warm, almost fond. I said, "Damon," and sat down across from him. Yvette poured coffee. She talked about the weather, about a neighbor's new fence, about how Damon had helped her move a piece of furniture last weekend. Her voice had that particular brightness that women use when they're trying to keep a room from catching fire. I let her talk. I wrapped both hands around my mug, and I waited. Damon waited too, but differently. His patience was the patience of someone who thought he was letting me settle in, like he was doing me a courtesy. When Yvette finally sat down, I opened the folder. I set 3 pages on the table, one at a time, centered, deliberate. "The first one," I said, "is a record of withdrawals from a joint account I believed was closed. 6 months of transactions, starting 3 weeks after Damon left. The second is a summary from a financial fraud examiner. It traces startup capital from a private investment account, opened in both our names, funded with money moved from our shared savings before the divorce was filed." I set the 3rd page down. "That one is the draft of a family court petition. It documents 31 months of child support payments that came in short. The calculation for arrears with interest is at the bottom." The table was quiet. Damon didn't move right away. Then he picked up the 1st page, glanced at it, set it back down like it was something mildly interesting he'd already seen. "Those account numbers don't match anything I recognize," he said. "I don't know where she got this." "The examiner's contact information is on the 2nd page. "Renee." He spread his hands, patient, almost kind. "You've always been good at building a case, I'll give you that. But you're taking a bunch of disconnected financial records and constructing a story around them because that's what you need to believe." He shook his head slowly. "This isn't evidence. This is a grievance dressed up in paperwork. You know what I've learned about men like Damon? They're most convincing right before they overplay." I didn't respond. I looked at Yvette. She was watching her son. Her coffee cup hadn't moved. Damon turned to her. And that's when he made his mistake. "Mom?" His voice shifted, softer, more familiar, the voice he used when he needed her to take his side. "She's always been vindictive. This is what she does. She holds on to things. She builds these narratives. You know how she is." The room went very still. I looked at Yvette directly. "I sent you pictures of your granddaughter every single month for 4 years, I said. You never responded." Yvette went quiet in a way that was different from before. The hosting brightness drained out of her face. She looked at Damon. He started talking. Something about how things were complicated, about how he'd asked her not to engage directly, about how he was trying to manage the situation. He had an explanation. Of course he did. Yvette raised one hand. He stopped. She didn't look at him again. Damon turned back to me. I watched him recalibrate. The shift was almost visible, like a thermostat clicking over, the negotiator replacing the victim. "Renee, quieter now. We don't have to do this, any of this. We were good together once, you know that." A pause, waited and practiced. "I think if we gave it a real chance, if we just talked, we could figure something out. Together." My hands were still on the table. "You don't want me, Damon," I said. "You want a lifeline." He started to speak. I was one before, I said. I'm done with that job. He went quiet. I told him what came next, the fraud complaint, already drafted, filed through Deshawn's examiner contact. The family court petition, complete and ready. The arrears calculation, with interest, attached as an exhibit. He had 1 week before everything filed. I wasn't asking for his input. I was giving him the courtesy of knowing. His jaw tightened. He looked at the papers. He looked at me. I stood up, closed the folder, and picked up my bag. Then I looked at Yvette. She's beautiful, I said. Your granddaughter. She has your eyes. I walked out. I sat in my car at the curb for a moment. My hands were in my lap, completely still. Not shaking, not gripping, just still, the way hands are when the work is finally done. I pulled away from the curb and drove toward Phyllis's house to pick up Amara. Somewhere on the highway, the tears came. Not sharp, not sudden, more like something slow releasing, a pressure I hadn't known I was still holding. I cried the whole last stretch of the drive, not because it hurt, because it was over, because I had done it, because it was finally done. The morning after Sunday dinner, I was in Deshawn Monroe's office by 9 o'clock. He had the referral packet ready on the corner of his desk, organized the way he organized everything, which is to say, immaculately. I read through it once. Then I picked up the pen and signed my name. 4 years of quiet documentation reduced to a signature. It felt smaller than I expected, and more permanent. Deshawn slid the packet into a manila envelope without ceremony. My contact files this today, he said. Once it's in, it triggers a formal review. That review can take anywhere from 6 weeks to 6 months, depending on their workload. But the referral itself is time-stamped. The record exists. That's enough for now, I said. He nodded. That was one of the things I valued about Deshawn. He never needed me to perform gratitude, and he never padded the silence. I drove to work with the receipt copy folded in my purse. The referral was done. By that same afternoon, Phyllis had filed the family court petition. She called me on my lunch break. "It's in," she said. 2 words. She didn't need more. 1 week later. Damon's attorney filed a counter-response in 4 days. I'll give him credit for the speed, if nothing else. The counter-filing argued that the joint account withdrawals were a clerical error, funds from a rollover that had been misrouted, paperwork that was never corrected, nothing intentional. I remember reading that and thinking, he actually believed that would land. Deshawn had the rebuttal ready in 6 days. Transaction timestamps, internal transfer records, the paper trail from the joint account to the private investment account to the startup's initial capital deposit. You don't misroute money incrementally over 6 months. You don't accidentally fund a business venture with money that was supposed to stay in a rollover. Deshawn laid it out in 17 pages, each one more airtight than the last. His attorney went quiet after that. Not conceding, just quiet, which, in legal terms, is close enough. You know what the worst part of watching that process was? It wasn't complicated. It wasn't hard to follow. The evidence was just sitting there, patient and obvious, waiting for someone to look at it properly. Damon had counted on nobody looking. Yvette called on a Wednesday, 9 days after Sunday dinner. I was standing at my kitchen counter when my phone buzzed with her name. My throat tightened. Just slightly, just for a second. I answered. She didn't ask about Damon. She didn't mention the petition or the referral or the counter-filing. She was quiet for a moment, and then she said, "I'd like to meet her, if you'd ever allow it. I understand if you wouldn't." That was it. No performance, no negotiating, just a woman asking plainly for something she had no right to demand. I didn't answer right away. I told her I'd think about it. She said she appreciated that and got off the phone before it got complicated. I thought about it for 2 days. I turned it over the way I turn over anything hard. Not spiraling, just looking at it from every angle until I could see it clearly. My mother had pressed a 50 into my hand the week before Amara was born. "You're going to be okay, because you're mine." I still heard that sometimes, in the quietest moments. I knew what it meant to have a woman in your corner who simply claimed you. Amara deserved that. She hadn't done anything wrong. Yvette's choices, The silence, the enabling, the years of looking away. Those were Yvette's to carry, not my daughter's. I called Yvette back on Friday morning before my shift. Alternating Sundays, I said. My terms. Structured visits, supervised at first. That changes as trust is built, and that part moves at my pace. Yes, she said immediately. Damon is not part of this arrangement. A pause. I understand. I mean that, Yvette. Not implied. Not negotiable. If he shows up to a visit, the visit ends. I understand, she said again, and she meant it. I could hear the difference between a woman agreeing and a woman complying. This was agreement. I hung up and stood in my kitchen for a moment. My chest felt complicated. Not warm, not cold, just full of something I didn't have a word for yet. That same evening, I pulled up to Amara's daycare at 5:30, right in the middle of that amber stretch of late afternoon when everything looks like it's been lit from somewhere gentler. She came barreling out of the classroom door the way she always did, backpack bouncing, both braids working loose, one sock pulled higher than the other. I caught her. I always caught her. I buckled her into her car seat, tucked her stuffed rabbit into the space beside her, and got in. She chattered about something that happened at snack time. Someone spilled juice. It was apparently very dramatic. The details were extensive. I listened to every word. I pulled onto the main road and drove toward home through the amber light. I didn't feel triumphant. I want to be clear about that. Triumph is loud, and what I felt was something much quieter than that. I felt clear, like a window after rain, the kind of clean where you forget the glass is even there. For the first time in years, every next step was entirely my own. 8 months later. The new apartment had a yard. Not a big one, just a strip of grass behind the back door, narrow enough that I could water the whole thing with one turn of the hose. But Amara could run in it. That was enough. That was the whole point. Saturday morning, oatmeal on the stove, the good kind with brown sugar and a little cinnamon, the kind my mother used to make on the days she wanted the house to smell like something safe. Phyllis, my oldest friend and the woman who built half my legal case on a retired paralegal's instincts and sheer stubbornness, was at my kitchen table working on her second cup of coffee. She hadn't asked if she could come over. She never asks anymore. She just shows up on Saturdays with her own mug and the assumption that she's welcome, which she always is. The yard looks good, she said, not looking up from her phone. I planted 2 things, I said. One of them survived. That's gardening. That's Phyllis. You want to know what 8 months looks like when things actually go the way they're supposed to? It doesn't look like a parade. It looks like this. Oatmeal and a quiet kitchen and your best friend not needing to fill the silence. The fraud investigation concluded 4 months after Deshawn filed the referral. The findings came back confirmed. The diverted funds were real, the paper trail held, and Damon's personal liability on the collapsed business loan increased substantially once the examiner's findings were folded into the creditor's claims. He couldn't argue his way out of documentation. He never could. He vacated the expensive apartment in March, moved back into Yvette's house, into the room he'd grown up in, which struck me as the most precise consequence I could have imagined. Not because I wished him small, I genuinely didn't, but because a man who built his entire identity around appearances had been returned, neatly, to the place where that habit started. The family court awarded the full back child support with interest, 5 years of short payments, recalculated properly, with the interest line Deshawn had documented down to the dollar. Damon didn't contest the final judgment. He had nothing left to contest with. I remember the day that order came through. Deshawn called me at work. I stepped into the break room, read the number he texted me, and stood very still for about 10 seconds. My eyes stung. Just for a moment. Just the once. Then I went back to my patients. Let me tell you something about the investment account. It's not a large number. I put in what I can every month, automatic transfer, my name alone on every document. Deshawn set it up and walked me through it, and then handed me the login and stepped back, the way he always does. Some months it's more, some months it's just enough to keep the habit. But it's there. It's mine. Every dollar in it came from work I did with my own hands and my own license, and nobody can move it and nobody can touch it. and I look at the balance sometimes just because I can. I passed my RN boards in February, studied for 6 months, mostly after Amara was asleep, textbook open on the kitchen table, cold coffee at my elbow. The night the results came back, I sat in the bathroom floor for a good 5 minutes, just breathing. Then I called Phyllis. She said, "Obviously," and I laughed until I needed to stop. The supervising nurse position came through in April. My hospital, my floor, the team I'd already been holding together informally for 2 years. My manager said the role had been mine to lose. I hadn't lost it. Yvette sees Amara on alternating Sundays. The visits are short, and they're careful, and they are, slowly, genuinely, becoming real. Yvette brings small things: a book, a pair of socks with ducks on them, a puzzle with the pieces in a zip bag because the box fell apart. She doesn't try to make up for the years. She just shows up and pays attention. I watch her watch my daughter, and I think, this is the best version of you. I hope it's not too late. Damon has not come back to the door. It was a Tuesday evening a few weeks back. I was in the kitchen and Amara was in the living room doing what she does. She'd lined all her little plastic animals across the coffee table in a row, very serious about it, adjusting and readjusting the order like it mattered, which to her it completely did. I was watching her from the doorway, just watching. She looked up and found me there, studied me for a second the way 4-year-olds do, like they're reading something you didn't know you were broadcasting. "Mama," she said, "are you happy?" I looked at my daughter. I didn't hesitate. "Yeah, baby, I really am." She nodded, satisfied, and went back to her animals. I turned back to the stove. The oatmeal was ready. The morning was quiet, and the yard was out the back door, and Phyllis was at my table, and every single thing in that kitchen belonged to me. I didn't get the life I planned. I got something better. I got the one I built. Thank you for watching until the end. If this story meant something to you, hit subscribe and turn on notifications. I've got 2 stories on the screen that you have to watch next. Have a great day!